All right, well, we are recording. Cara from the Champagne Diet, thank you so much for joining us. You may not know Cara, but I feel like I know her because I follow her on Instagram, and that is the beauty of social media. Sometimes you really do feel like you know the person, even if you've never met them in person. So I'm so excited for you all to get to know her. I am even more excited for you all to get this book, Like She Owns the Place, because I could not put it down. Literally, I was at Taylor Swift all night last night and woke up early to finish reading it for today, just for you, Cara.
That makes me so happy. Thank you.
Because I couldn't put it down. So, Cara, because some of my people may not know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having me and thank you for sharing me with your girls. I'm really excited to be here. So I hate to put it like just one title. I hate to give myself like that one kind of title, but I guess, I mean, more than anything, I write books. I'm an author. I'm also a certified master life coach. I have a podcast. Basically, I love to just call myself a champion for women. I love working with women who are what I call like on the edge of change, going through a transformative time in their life, whether it's a career move or getting out of a relationship or just kind of reinventing themselves. I'm obsessed with self-reinvention. I think it's one of the most thrilling experiences, we can give ourselves as women. And I've been doing this for a while. I started with a blog 10 years ago. Which is so crazy to say. My blog was called The Champagne Diet, and it was actually inspired by a glass of champagne. Felt like when a friend just recommended that I start drinking champagne as part of like a new diet that I was going on because it was lighter in calories.
Which we should all do, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, right? So as a joke, I started calling the blog The Champagne Diet because at first it was really about a health and wellness journey, but I quickly realized it was so much less about an actual glass of champagne and really a metaphor for living our best lives, celebrating every single day with or without champagne, indulging in those little luxuries and really just embracing ourselves as women exactly as we are. So that's like the short version of the very, very long story, but that's kind of everything that I stand for in a nutshell.
Awesome. I was just on a coaching call last week and I told one of my clients, like, use your good shit now. Like, don't wait until she was like, oh, I bought these new shoes and I'm scared to wear them. And so I'm walking around with my holy shoes on. And I was like, girl, why? Use it now, right? And so I love that you really encourage women to kind of enjoy the good life right now. And I think that really is what the Champagne Diet is for you. At least that's my impression.
Absolutely.
Is that it is about enjoying the good life today, right?
Yes. On any budget, no matter what. I mean, I just gave myself the best experience with a bath bomb and like grocery store flowers. It doesn't have to be expensive. You can do it no matter where you're at in your life, financially, or even just like even if you have 15 minutes a day, that makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. So here's what I love. You introduce yourself as an author, right? And I think that has not always been how you would think of yourself, even though you say that you've always loved writing, but that's kind of a new title for you to pick up, even though you've written, 4 or 5 books now. And so I love that you started with that because I think that's huge for you.
Yeah, I had a hard time calling myself an author for a while. My first book that I always wanted to write a book. That was kind of always my dream from the time I was a little girl. And my first book was actually rejected 19 times by 19 different publishers. I didn't even know there were 19 publishers out there to reject me. And at that point, I decided to go ahead and self-publish after a lot of heartache and a lot of agony and a lot of like overthinking. And when I self-published, I still kind of had that imposter syndrome going on, which I talk a lot about in the book. And it took me a really long time to call myself an author proudly, but that is what I am. And whether or not I have a major publisher behind me now, I do. It took me a long time to get there. But whether or not I self-publish or I don't, I think it's important that we call ourselves what we are. Even if you haven't published your book and you've just started writing it, or even if you're in life coaching school, or even if you just, discovered art and you started painting, I think we have to kind of, like I like to say, anoint ourselves that title, because once you start to speak that into the world and into the universe, people start to believe it and you start to embody that.
Absolutely. And I also really loved, one, that 19 publishers turned you down and you were like, I'm going to put this out anyway. Like, the world needs this. And you continued to put it out with this vision of just being of service. Like, it really, to me, my perspective was it wasn't ever about getting the big publisher, that's almost just kind of bonus at this point, right?
For sure.
Yeah, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I think, sometimes we put our success, we think success exists outside of ourselves. And in the book, I actually talk about, I have a concept that like success is a state of being.
Yeah.
And, if you believe you are successful, then you are successful. And I think it's really just about getting closer and closer to our purpose and our passion in life, as opposed to kind of hitting these goals that we these arbitrary goals we create for ourselves because we just, they're random. We think we should, get this kind of title. We think we should have this magical number in our bank account. But at the end of the day, it's just about doing what you love to do.
Yeah. And so what do you think kept you driven to just keep putting it out there in the world?
I get like chills thinking about it because this is how I feel still to this day. Like I just had a voice inside me that just would not shut up. It was just something in me. It was my obsession. I would find myself daydreaming about writing and just imagining like a book being there, and just imagining like a woman saying to me, this book changed my life, and those were the things. It was something that was undeniable. And I think we all have that little thing in us. And even if you don't think you have it yet, it is somewhere in there. I think we just sometimes we push it away or block it out.
Yeah.
But for me, it was just that like undeniable passion. And it was the thing I kept coming back to. And it became so much more powerful than my fear.
Yeah.
And I think like, and a lot of people can probably relate to this too. Like once you start putting energy into something and you just get in motion, you kind of run out of time to be afraid. You don't even have the space to like overthink,
Yeah. So I'm the same way with speaking. Like it terrifies me every time I get up on a stage, but every single time I see someone else speaking on stage, I literally see myself on a stage in front of 7,000 people. Like I get that feeling throughout my entire body, right? And so you have to just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And once you start, like for me, it's like 10 minutes in, I'm good to go. And then I can just like be my natural self, which is awesome. But it's getting over that initial fear that I think holds so many women back because they're scared of how other people are going to perceive them. And I love that you talk about that in the book as well. Your experience kind of not being authentic and then kind of snapping into your authentic self. We've all had those moments. So I love that you shared that. So let's just dive into the book, Like She Owns the Place. First off, you dedicated it to your mom. And as someone who is like obsessed with her mother, I loved that. Why was it so important for you to dedicate it to your mom?
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. I feel like sometimes that gets overlooked, like people with dedication. So I think it's cool that you noticed.
Yeah.
My mom has always been my biggest supporter. She's a single mom. My dad was out of the picture.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she just raised us, like had like nothing. Like we were broke, dirt poor growing up. She worked 2 jobs. She put herself through college, took out loans to put me and my brother in school, and just always like, she was always like afraid. Like she always wanted us to do well. And she was always like, get a good job and stay there forever. But she also knew that I had something else in me, like this rebellious side that wanted to go do my own thing. And I think it was probably really hard for her to watch this, wanting your kid to be safe, but then also wanting your kid to go out there and chase every wild dream, which comes with a lot of risks. And she always supported that. And she always knew that I wanted to write a book and supported me like the entire way through every single, heartbreak of not getting the book out there, every single, crazy phone call and email and text. So it was just important for me to acknowledge her in that way. And I know that, now that I have a publisher and kind of been through this whole thing, like for my first like traditionally published book, I just thought it would mean a lot if I, really acknowledged her in like a big way. So.
Yeah. Well, I love that. You and I grew up very similarly. I've heard you tell that story before, and I was just like, I totally get it. Like the mom that just literally sacrificed herself for my success as well. So what was it like for you to like I saw the Insta story, but tell my crew, what was it like for you to give your mom that book for the first time?
Oh my gosh. She started crying as soon as she opened that page. She was like, oh, and she's so proud of it. It's funny because she called me, she started reading it and she called me, she goes, it's actually really good. And I was like, actually.
Thanks, Mom. Yeah. Thanks. Did you think it wouldn't be after all this time?
I know. It was really funny. We started cracking up, but it was good. She loved it. And like I gave a copy to her best friend and she started reading it. And my mom is 61. Her best friend is around the same age. And her best friend texted me and then called my mom. And she was like, this book speaks to women of all ages. Like I feel like I'm relating so much to it, even though there's an age difference. That made me feel really good. So I think it does kind of, across the board, it really transcends age. And I think in whatever situation you're in, it speaks to a lot of different women.
Yeah, and Cara, here's what I love about you. So I live in Kentucky, right? You can probably tell by the accent. So I
I
live in
love your
Kentucky,
accent.
and you are in New York, and so we probably have very different lives from each other just in terms of what we do day to day. But yet I'm reading this book and I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And so I love that you have found this very universal message that really speaks to women regardless of where they're at. And sometimes that's hard to do. So I really appreciate that about the book.
Thank you.
So the book starts really with this bang of a mantra: check your fucks at the door. And I was like, yes, girl, tell everyone that's what you need to do. What do you want women to know about that? Like, why is that so important for them to start doing?
So, like, as a coach and as someone who's been very connected to women through the years through my writing, like, I can honestly say the biggest thing that I hear from women of why they're not chasing their dreams is that they're worried about what other people are going to think of them.
Mm-hmm.
They're scared of who's going to talk about them, who's going to gossip, who's going to, disagree or maybe challenge them in some way. And I mean, I know I personally went through it too. When I was thinking of leaving my corporate job that I was at for many years to go and do what I do now, I was scared. So getting over that hump and really just learning to check my fucks at the door. I'll never forget how that came to me. I was having brunch with a girl who had a blog, and she was, just telling me like, I'm scared, I'm nervous. And I said, you just have to check your fucks at the door. And I was looking at a coat check when I said it. And that's where it came from. Like, I was like looking at people check their coats. I'm like, just check your fucks. Like, honestly,
right.
Who cares? You just can't care. And I think when you do it the first time and you just do something and you put yourself out there and you're like, okay, I really don't care, but I really do care, but I really don't care, but it gets easier. And then it becomes addictive. Then it becomes this thing where you're like, I'm going to show them, like, look, I really just do not care. And I'm going to just do what makes me happy. At the end of the day, like, maybe people will talk about you or people will gossip about you. It happens, but like, it's over in 5 minutes. And what's important is your path and your story. And it really, like, who cares if somebody else is not on board with it?
And I love this quote that, like, what other people think of me is none of my business. And so, like, remembering that really it says more about them than it does about me, because I at least have the courage to go for it, right? Yes. Versus the person that's wasting their time talking about me going for it. So I love that. I love that. So you say that finding your authentic self starts with your gut and, like, just listening to your gut. How do you think women can start listening to their intuition more and really listening to what their gut has to say?
So I think there's a few ways to do it. One of the ways that I talk about in the book too, I have a term called audacious auditing.
Oh, girl, I have a note about that too, because I loved that chapter.
Thank you. It really ties in though, because you really need to take a look at who you're spending your time with. And I know that this is going to sound harsh, but if you are surrounding yourself with negative people who sit around and talk about other people and talk about all negative things, like, you are never going to find yourself in a situation where you feel like you are winning, where you feel like you're happy and where you feel like you're supported. And if you tell those people about your dreams and they knock them down, like, you're never able to listen to truly what you want, what's in your heart. So, like, that's kind of the first step, is taking stock of, like, who you're sharing things with. Because when you have something that that may be crazy, like, I think a lot of times things that are in our gut are kind of these wild ideas that we're afraid to share. And when we finally do share it with the wrong people, it kind of clouds that feeling. It clouds that gut feeling, and you start to overthink it, and you start to, take in other people's opinions. I think it requires, time alone. I think we have to kind of get comfortable being alone with our thoughts. It's scary for some women.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it's even scary for me sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and especially because once you start listening to your thoughts and listening to your gut, it's almost like once you know, you can't unknow. And so then you feel like, well, crap, now I have to actually take action on this, right? Because I know that this is what I need to do. And that action piece can be really scary for people.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Then it's kind of like you're accountable all of a sudden, right?
Yeah. So you talked about not thinking like a man and not, like, talking like a man. So I run this women's leadership program, and I did this survey about 100 women, and I said, what is your biggest leadership challenge? And about 70% of them said, in some way or another, I want to know how I can communicate without sounding like a bitch. And I'm like, seriously? Like, one, men don't think like this. And one of the reasons that I was so passionate about this specific leadership development program was because I felt like the traditional model was a very masculine model of leadership. So, how do you think women can start tapping into their very authentic leadership without having kind of these institutionalized messages of, if you speak up, you sound like a bitch? What can we do to start to encourage not hearing those amongst ourselves?
I think we have to get comfortable just asking for what we want. And what I see happening is, at least myself, and I've seen this happen through my whole career because I was in the corporate space for a while and I did have a lot of men around me. I was in advertising sales and it was kind of like a boys club. There was a lot of older men, and I was like a lot younger, and I felt very uncomfortable sometimes because I was afraid of being judged. But I think if you can do it in small ways, I always talk about like baby steps. I think baby steps are brilliant. I think if you can practice asserting yourself in the smallest of ways, it starts to become more of a habit. And I think we have to encourage other women to do the same thing, because if, it's so funny. It's like, there was a quote that I saw and it's like, well, I think I'm totally going to butcher it, but it was basically about women. Like, we want women to be confident, but then when a woman is confident, we turn around and tell her that she's a bitch, or we think she's cocky, or we think, so it's just, there's so many contradictions flying at us at all times about how we should be. And I think if you stop trying to be like someone else and just be yourself, whatever that looks like, you'll kind of find your groove. I know I used to look at women and say, well, I want to be like her when I'm, 30, or I want to be like her when I'm a director. And that's really dangerous because we take away our own power when we start to kind of like emulate someone else. But when it does come to asserting ourselves and putting ourselves out there and asking for what we want, you just have to do it. And you have to just kind of ignore those narratives and ignore what people are saying about you, and just trust that you are, you're doing what feels right for you. Again, it always comes back to authenticity. I think like everything, it comes back to just really knowing who you are. I think I've really, come to the conclusion that I'm a really nice, kind, warm person, but I'm also very direct, and I also know how to get what I need. And like, it was hard for me to bridge those two for a long time. I thought if I was direct, I had to just be cold, and I couldn't use emojis in an email or an explanation point, or like I couldn't use a smiley face. Those are just stupid rules that somebody made up and told us, I think you don't see these rules for men.
No.
Like we don't see people saying men shouldn't use a smiley face in an email. Like,
right.
Why us? It's crazy.
Yeah. So I love that you said it's good to kind of see traits in other women, but don't like try to be those other women.
Yeah.
One of the best things a mentor ever told me, literally since I was 5, the only thing that I ever said that I wanted to do was be the next Oprah. And I remember one day she said to me, Colene, why don't you just focus on being the first Colene? And I was like, what? And it made so much sense because I'll never be Oprah, right? And so it's like, why don't I just focus on how I present myself to the world? And that's exactly what Oprah does. And I love that about her too, because she truly is like her most authentic self. So I love that you brought that up. Yeah.
Well,
so,
I think there's a fine, I'm sorry. I think there's like a fine line between inspiration and imitation.
Yeah.
So I always I always tell people, like, just check yourself. Are you inspired, or are you like imitating them? Like, so inspiration versus imitation, it's an interesting conversation to have with yourself sometimes. And we do take things in around us, especially online. Like, I'll sometimes see something, I'm like, is that my quote or is that someone else's quote?
Right.
Did I write that, or did you write that first? Like, you just kind of have to be aware. And I think, again, it goes back to like spending time alone and just, being cautious of what you're consuming.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I've learned from you, I've been following you probably about 1.5 years, 2 years now. And one of the things that I learned from you was kind of to stop reading some self-help books, because it does kind of, you start to regurgitate information, and then you're like, wait, is this my own thought, or did I read this somewhere? And so, except for this book, everyone needs to read this book.
Well, I'm kind of like the anti-self-help person, I think. Like, I even say in the book, I'm not an expert on confidence. I don't believe there are any experts. I don't believe there are gurus. I don't think we should, the self-help world has like a weird worship mentality to it. You see people kind of like worshiping like certain figures in the community, and it's just weird to me. Like, I'm just like, no, I'm just a girl who's figured some stuff out, and I want to share it with you. And if you take what you want from it, leave what you don't. And,
Well, and I love that you always come across as a peer. Like, it's like I'm just sharing information with you as a peer
Yes.
who has figured this one thing out, right?
Yeah,
But I also
exactly.
love that even once you figure one thing out, you still grow with it because you talk a lot about your challenges with your weight and your challenges with your health. And so I love that it's kind of this constant evolving conversation. It's not just, I've arrived here and now let me tell you what I know, right? So I
Exactly.
think that that's really awesome. I
Thank
think
you.
that's really awesome. So I loved what you said about anxiety is just energy and this idea of channeling it into something positive. How can we start to flip that script on ourselves when we're starting to feel anxious? How can we start shifting it into something positive?
So I struggled with anxiety disorder for a long time. I saw a therapist for 5 years who really, really helped me through a lot of it. And he's the one, actually, Dr. Fritz. He's been on my podcast. He's amazing.
Uh-huh.
Go follow him on Instagram. Well, he doesn't
Yeah.
post enough. I'm kind of getting him more on the Instagram game, but he's
You're
really,
coaching him on it.
yeah, exactly. But I remember like I was afraid of everything, growing up. I was afraid to fly. I was afraid of boats. I was afraid of loud noises. Like I was just a ball of nerves, like for a long, long time. And he sat down one day and he told me that. He was like, do you realize that anxiety is just energy, right? And I was like, oh my God, my mind was just blown, because I had always put such a negative spin on it. And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, the part of you that's afraid and scared and anxious is filled with energy. And that also feeds into the part of you that's really driven and hungry and focused and works really hard and has all this passion. So if you can just figure out a way to move all that nervous energy into something positive, like your work and your passion, you're going to feel a lot better. And that's exactly what I started doing. And I realized that I could really control my thoughts. And that's really what it comes down to, right? Controlling our
Yeah.
thoughts and then controlling our feelings. So I always, tell women like, I think it's just such a great way to look at it. At the end of the day, anxiety does come up. It still comes up for me
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, but I've learned to move through it a little bit quicker. And I have some tactics and some ways that I'm able to move through it. But most of the time it is just really kind of putting it all in a different place.
Yeah. When I go out to speak, that's one of the things that I tell myself is it's like I'm nervous because I care and I care because I want to help and be of service to as many people as possible. And if I wasn't nervous, that would mean that I didn't care. So I always start every speech with, I'm so excited to be here. And that really does trigger my brain to kind of shift from nerves to excitement, and that's a different kind of energy. So I love that you brought that up too, because I do that and it's hard sometimes when you're in that moment feeling anxious to remind yourself that you really do kind of control how you feel about certain situations.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's also important sometimes to even just be honest and say, I'm really excited and I'm also a little bit nervous,
Oh
and kind
yeah.
of like level the playing field. I do that a lot with people. I'm like, this is kind of freaking me out right now. It's a big
Yeah.
stage, a lot of people here. And like, then you kind of break the ice and you make people feel like it's okay. So if you
Yeah.
do bumble on a line or if you do lose your train of thought, I've had many experiences where that's happened to me, and I talk about it in the book, The Tokyo
Uh-huh.
Story. And like, you just kind of have, again, you have to own it. Right?
Yeah. So I'm glad that was a perfect segue to where I was going next. The Stevie Nicks story that you shared in the book and how she was so authentic in that moment, like forgetting her drummer's name. And I thought that was so great. And it really, last night at the Taylor Swift concert, Taylor talked about how she needed to take this break to figure out who she was. And she wasn't writing music. She wasn't performing. She wasn't going on tour. She was just like sitting at her house writing and figuring things out. And the crowd went wild when she talked about it. And she said, I love you all because you all like support the fact that I said it, I needed a minute for myself. And so I think we all see these examples of people being vulnerable, and we know that we appreciate that. But why do you think that it's still so hard for so many of us to tap into being vulnerable?
Well, I think, like you said it best, like we see other people we're inspired by, but when it comes down to us, we're just like scared shitless. Everybody's afraid, they feel like they're going to look bad. And again, coming back to like people talking about them or looking like they're not in control, or especially as women, we always, I think most of us, especially like, alpha women, strong women who are, really, really driven, we always want to look like we have it all together.
Yeah.
I think we're afraid that if we are vulnerable, somebody will then use that against us, or think we're weak, or we're not worthy, or we shouldn't be in the position that we're in. But it's the exact opposite. Yeah. And again, like approaching it, it just comes down to doing it in small ways, saying I'm nervous, saying I'm a little bit fearful. I think when I expose myself, right, when I talk about myself, vulnerable moments, I talk about it in a way where I can teach what I learned from it. And I think that's a good way to look at it too. Like kind of move through the moment and then tell the story, like how Taylor did, she probably wasn't posting on her Instagram, oh my God, you guys, I'm having a horrible day. Like right. I can't do this anymore. I don't know who I am. She told everyone after she moved through it.
Yeah.
Shared what she learned from it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to kind of process it yourself a little bit before you start to share it, because if not, sometimes it can come off a little messy.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. In the midst of it, it's like, yeah, there's a time and a place, I think.
Yeah. So one of the other big premises of the book is self-love. And you said that, let me see, it wasn't that you hated yourself, but it wasn't self-love. And I think that, or you said self-love wasn't on your radar. And I think for so many women, they don't hate themselves. It's more they're just very apathetic about themselves. How do we start? I think so many people could relate to that specific thing where it's just, yeah, I mean, I'm cool with myself, but it's not this sense of self-love. How can we start to kind of move from apathy to self-love?
That's a great question. And I think a lot of women are wondering that, like, how do I just turn around and love who I am? Am I supposed to skyride it? Right. Like, am I supposed to like shout it from the rooftops? I think it happens in small ways, and I think first and foremost, it comes down to looking for the positives and learning how to celebrate ourselves. And it can be awkward at first to say, wow, Cara, you did a great job, with that talk that you gave. Like, it feels weird, to kind of to do that, because we're always used to, I think our default setting is negativity.
Oh,
our default setting can be like beating ourselves up.
Because it's easier. I mean, it's like easier, right? Versus like giving yourself the permission to default to happy.
Yes, totally. And I mean, I talk about gratitude so much, but I think gratitude is a really important way to express that self-love to ourselves. Just thanking God, the universe, whatever, the higher power for the day, just waking up in the morning and having gratitude and being thankful for the fact that, you get to do what you love every day, being thankful for the fact that like we're healthy, we're here, and then you can move into starting to celebrate those things. And it kind of just becomes, you have to make it a new habit, really.
Yeah.
It's got to be something like I talk about, like these little different things that I do for myself. Like, for example, I have a to-do list. We all have to-do lists, right? And I started doing this thing called the celebration list at night. And this has been a really good way for me to tap into self-love. So at the end of the day, I take that to-do list and I put it away, and I take out a pad and a paper and I write down everything I accomplished that day, big or small, even if it was just doing laundry or answering emails. And I start to celebrate every single thing that I got done. And it shifts the focus from what I didn't do to what I did do. And it builds positive momentum for them the next day, to walk into it focusing on all the stuff that happened.
I love that.
Thank you. Yeah. And sometimes that list is short. Sometimes there's only a few things on it. Like, I think I posted the other day, I was like, I answered like 55 emails, and then the next day I just washed my hair.
Right.
And that was an accomplishment to me. But those little things, and realizing that no one is going to give you that pat on the back, and you've got to give it to yourself. You can't wait on someone else.
And I love that, because I think so many women, we are waiting for someone to acknowledge the work that we're doing, and we're waiting for that permission, and we're waiting for that right? And it's like, you kind of got to be your own biggest fan and your own biggest cheerleader and pat your own self on the back. And that's okay to do as a woman.
Yes. I remember when I worked in corporate, I would wait for like the yearly performance reviews. We would have them once a year, and like my stomach would be in knots, and I would wait to see what my grade was. And it felt like so weird. And now as an entrepreneur, I've been doing this, on my own for now almost 4 years. Like, I have to really take the time and give myself those performance reviews and celebrate what I'm doing. And every year, and I do this sometimes actually in the middle of the year too. I just did this in June, going through like kind of where I'm at, everything that I've accomplished, just listing it out, almost like a big celebration list, you know, all the things that I've done and the stuff that I'm proud of, and like, and taking a moment to really say like, wow, you know, you did it. Like, look at all this great stuff behind you. Like, let's use this to fuel the next big move.
Yeah, I have this I'm awesome folder that I keep where people, like, if they send me really nice emails about something, I'll kind of store it in there, and or get feedback from a training, or it's like, just sometimes you need that reminder that you are headed in the right direction, because when you're in the midst of it, it can feel like, what am I even doing today? You know, like, what's even going on? So just giving yourself that time and the permission to kind of acknowledge yourself, I think, is amazing. So the book really covers the gamut. I mean, I felt like there was no subject that was not talked about in the book. It's an all-inclusive book for every woman, and I loved it so much. So what would you really want women to know about this book?
That's a good question. I think I just want women to know that they are perfect exactly as they are right here in this moment, and stop waiting for, you know, the next big thing to happen. Stop waiting for someone to come along and tell you that you're fabulous, and, you know, just embrace who you are right now in every single area of your life. Like you mentioned, I talk about career, I talk about beauty, I talk about body image, you know, just be okay with who you are and start with love. You know, you can make changes. You should want to strive to be better. I'm not saying that we shouldn't want things and we shouldn't go for things, but if you start going for things and changing from a place of love as opposed to a place of, you know, self-loathing, or, you know, feeling like we're not good enough in the moment, it just changes everything.
Yeah, yeah. And we didn't even get to talk about beauty, but that whole section on beauty being a vibe, I totally related to that, because I've seen some really, like, I studied anthropology, so I learned, you know, like, it's the symmetry of face and the dimensions, and but I've seen people that look attractively beautiful but are not beautiful people. And so I love this idea of kind of flipping the script of beauty in general to an energy versus outward appearance. I think that will transform how people start to think about beauty, and beauty within themselves too.
Yeah, I really hope so. And I think, yeah, when you're having like a great day and you're feeling really on, like, it's less about like what your makeup looks like or your outfit. It's how you feel, and you're radiating that, and people
that
smile
vibe
at you, and yeah, it's a whole different thing. So I hope that chapter really hits home for some people.
So just a couple more questions. What are you feeling right now during the launch of this book? You all have not been following her on Instagram. It has, I mean, a marathon. I feel like I've watched all of this unfold over the last few months, and it's been so fun to see, because as someone who also wants to publish a book one day, it's just kind of like seeing the process from beginning to end. And you're on this marathon interview sprint too. So what are you feeling right now through this entire process?
You know, if you would have asked me this a week ago, I would have told you that I felt really nervous, and I felt like really anxious about it. But now I just feel so fired up and so excited and so proud, and really just can't wait for women to read it. Like, I really, truly, I put everything of me, every single ounce of me into this book. Like, it's my heart on the page, and I'm just so thrilled to start hearing what people think, and just hopefully, I don't know, just watching some women transform and just feel really good. I think my husband and I had a conversation about purpose the other day, and he said, what do you think your purpose is? And I went through this whole big thing, right? I gave this whole spiel, and it was going on and on and on. And then I turned around and I said, no, actually, I think my purpose is I just want to make people feel something.
Love it. Yeah.
I just want to make, so that's kind of where I'm at right now. I just want people to feel something when they read this book.
And I know that they will. I know that they will, not just because of the content, but the exercises that you provide too, I think are going to be so beneficial to the women that are going to be going through it, that it really is kind of this one-stop shop to just like get your shit together, you know? You know, I loved it. I loved it so much. So what's next for you, Cara? You now have this book that's coming out into the world. It will probably be out in the world by the time we publish this. What's next for you? What do you see yourself doing next?
So I'm already thinking of my next book because I'm obsessed with writing. So I kind of have an idea for that. I want to keep working on my clothing line. I love being creative. You know, I view myself really as like a creative and artist before anything, you know, before a businesswoman, before a coach. So I love creating things. So I have my clothing and working on some designs for that and just continuing to connect. You know, I think sometimes, you know, we get so caught up in our work that we forget to connect with people. And like, I love connecting with you right now and everyone that's listening. I just want to continue to do more of this. And yeah.
Awesome.
That's it.
Awesome. Cara, thank you so much for being here. Tell everyone how we can find you. Where do we go to find you at?
Thank you so much. So if you want to grab the book, you can go to likesheownstheplace.com or get it in any bookstore. To find me, I'm at thechampagnediet.com, and my podcast is called Style Your Mind on iTunes and Stitcher, and I'm on Instagram pretty much every day at The Champagne Diet.
Like literally, you all follow her Instagram. It's like so much fun to follow, especially for people like me that are in Kentucky. It's like, oh, look, she's at the Pyramid Club tonight. Like it just, it's just fun. I know, I saw. I was like, I'm like partying with Taylor Swift and she was at the Pyramid Club and it was awesome. So,
I love it.
Yeah, well, Cara, I really appreciate you being here. And I'm so excited for you and so excited for the women to read this book because you all could not put it down. I think Friday you all sent it to me and I was just kind of like, oh my gosh, like, let me keep reading. And I'm just so proud of you and the work that you've done and this journey that you've taken and your level of commitment to just being yourself, but also like continuing the journey even when things get hard, because I know that that's not always easy. So thank you so much for showing up in the world and for owning your own place. Like, I think that's so awesome. And I look forward to connecting again soon. Thank you so much, Cara.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a great one.
Thanks.